Hi, and welcome to the show. You are on the Cheap Mama Life podcast, and I am your host. I'm your Cheap Mama, Brenda Kilhofer, and today I'm excited to have another author in the studio, and this is another pandemic writing. So Carol Koppelman wrote a book called Do the Necessary and Let the Rest Go to Hell. So I'm excited for you to meet Carol. And Carol, take it away. Tell us a little bit about you and where your title came from.
Hi, I'm Carol Koppelman. I'm a semi-retired technical writer for many, many years. Worked for many Fortune 500 companies all over the country. The title came from Do the Necessary from St. Francis of Assisi. When you're going through times of strife, you do the necessary, then you do the possible, and eventually you do the impossible. The second part of the title came from my husband. And my husband is a Vietnam combat vet, so he understands. Let the rest go to hell. So that's where it is.
I love that when you shared that with me. It's that the title, you have on one hand you have Saint Francis Assisi, and on the other hand it's like go to hell, right? Let the rest go to hell. I love it.
That's right.
So tell us a little bit about what what we can expect to learn from you in your book, and what are the necessary, maybe a couple snippets and tidbits of what's necessary.
What you learn is I have gone through, like many people, many iterations of my identity through my life. And when I was younger, I tried everything and anything and had a pretty wild life. And that was a lot of fun, but at times it was searching for love in a lot of wrong places, searching for the meaning of it, searching for something that I couldn't catch. I moved from coast to coast, trying to search for a sense of home, even though I had a wonderful upbringing at home. It's just a sense of actual home. And finally, I found that in my faith. And let's say the things that doing the necessary, especially when you're in times of major transition, is do one thing at a time. Focus on, can I get up and say, thank you, God, for this day? Can I make that cup of coffee? Can I do just little tiny, tiny things? And give yourself a little time to breathe. Give yourself time to focus. I think what I've learned a lot is that we are surrounded, or we live in a beautiful, beautiful world. Certainly, I believe we live in a beautiful, beautiful country. I've been all over the world, and this is one of the most beautiful countries in the world, and probably the most diverse, beautiful country geographically. We're so fortunate. And look at the birds and look at the animals just living, and try to calm down that mind and get away from, I'm bad at this too, get away from all of the devices and just calm and be happy that you're surrounded by beauty. You really are. We are really surrounded by beauty every day. And just do one thing at a time, and especially breathe. I think those are the things that I learned. And have faith in something. For me, I have a faith in God. He provided for me during so many difficult times, magically, it out of nowhere. So I have a very deep faith in God, not based. I was raised Catholic, so not based on doctrine, based on relationship. And it sounds trite maybe, but relationships with your friends, your family, just the simple, simple things that my generation was fighting all kinds of weird battles at those times. And we got into esoteric, this will make you happy, this will make you happy. And it didn't. Those simple everyday things are going to, bring happiness.
Yeah, I think the pandemic brought a lot of that back too. I mean, certainly there was I love that you brought up, get off the devices. And I think, you're right. I mean, there can be really great positive uses for devices. I mean, there are people out there that may never have heard the advice that you're giving, that may only hear it because
Right.
they're listening to a podcast or something like that. But then
Mhm.
on the flip side, there's so much other stuff that you can get caught up in through the devices and the media, whether it's, games and, I know people get
Right.
trapped into pornography and,
Mhm.
the media certainly doesn't give you a picture of the beautiful world that you're talking about, right?
Mhm.
I mean, if
Mhm.
you listen to the media, we're in the worst place, and you know,
That's right.
we live in one of the worst places humanly possible, right? Um, and then I love, I love that you talk about that it's about relationship, right? I mean, even with
Mhm.
even with the animals, it's not necessarily about you know the I mean, we've got dogs, we've got cats, we've got horses, and especially with the horses, I find more and more that it's all about the relationship that you create with them.
Mhm.
That's where a lot of that beauty is in, and the relationship that you create with the outside world. I mean, how often do we just get stuck inside, the four walls of our home, and not out
Mhm.
there enjoying? And I think there was a lot of that in the pandemic. So what inspired you when all of this is going on, right? You've got a world in lockdown, um, and you know, there's fear for a lot of people. There's a lot going on. What inspired you? What said, what, I'm going to sit down, I'm going to write a book, and I am going to, inspire hope. I'm going to, you know, share my life lessons
Mhm.
with
Mhm.
others. What triggered that for you?
I saw a lot of fear, and certainly the media. I was a journalist for a couple years on a small newspaper in Nevada, and there's a quote that they use a lot: "If it bleeds, it reads," and unquote. And basically, the media thrives on chaos because that's where the news comes from. And I saw that, and I saw a lot of people feeling alienated and feeling alone. And, and I've felt that way in my life, and I wanted people to know that they're not now. By either their faith or reaching out, or people realizing we need to reach out. Our church was very good about reaching out to people. We did as much as we could within our own family and outside of that. And that's inspired me. I know how it feels to feel like there's no one there, even though there were plenty of people there. I know what it feels like to feel just discarded from the earth, even though you aren't. It's just you feel like that because all of this fear makes you feel like that. And I didn't want people to fear. I wanted, uh, that's what inspired me. People not feeling alone, reading maybe my experience with various transitions and ups and downs. And I was married to an alcoholic for, and that ended. A verbally abusive alcoholic, and going through that process and that kind of thing. And so I wanted them to understand, you will get through this. If you haven't gone through anything else in your life, but you're fearful about this, read about somebody who's gone through various iterations of decisions, some ups and downs that just happen in life, and maybe be inspired by that. So it was mainly, I wanted people to feel not alone, feel safe, and focus on some kind of faith in their lives. Mhm.
Isn't it crazy how when you really sit down to start, and I'm sure you've probably had experiences since publishing that with all people that relate to what you're sharing, and isn't it crazy how as we as humanity, as each of us walk through all
Mhm.
of these circumstances in our lives, we
Mhm.
always feel like, oh, nobody could understand. I'm the only one that's ever been through this. Nobody, and we've got this, this I don't want to say feeling of being humiliated and embarrassed to share.
Mhm.
And so
Mhm.
we carry these burdens, these questions, these fears, these doubts all on our own.
Mhm.
And
Absolutely.
then when the reality is, most of us are more alike than we are different, right? Most of us have had
Absolutely. Mhm.
many of the same experiences,
Mhm.
or at least felt the same, whether it be a
Absolutely.
different experience or not. But we felt those fears. We felt the desperation. We felt oh my gosh, I can't do this. And, I think most of us have those feelings at different points in our lives.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
I love that you took that and just shared and poured out and in a coming from a place of vulnerability. I'm sure some of it wasn't easy. Tell me about the process. How was writing for you and sharing some of those things?
Well, making the decision because my plan, when I retired was to write a children's book, but it didn't seem like the right time to do that, and I wanted to write something this vulnerable. But my writing process, because I was a professional writer for many, many years, but technical writing is a completely different writing, and being vulnerable too was really tough. There were several chapters that I cried through, and I don't have, I'm pretty organized in my write. Okay, but I have to cogitate it on it for like a few days, and then I write it. That's kind of how the process is. There are several chapters that I just cried through, but I thought that number one, it's a healing. It might be healing for someone else, but it was also probably healing for me as well. My dad read it, and he says, "Boy, you put it all out there, didn't you?" And I said, what I got to lose, right? Who cares? Really. That I it was it took I think I wrote it in about 9 months. So and I didn't write every day, but it was basically for me. I had all these thoughts in my mind about this chapter will be this chapter, chapter will be that, and I thought about it for 2 or 3 days, and then I would start writing. And then you find yourself editing again yourself. And then certainly your publisher edits it too and looks at it. And it's going through various levels of, thing. And now I read it again. I go, well, I would have written it differently. You find every author I know says that after they publish it, and it's been months afterwards, they go, I would have written it differently because you do that. But I think the bottom line is that if it helps one person or if it helps somebody going through a difficult time. Especially, it could be. I've had several men read it and be affected by it. Mostly women in transition. I found that women who were in various stages of transition in their lives, that they're moved, if they're going back to school or if they're marriage things or this kind of thing. That's those are the people who usually are affected by it, basically. So I didn't have a real classic. I had all kinds of post-it notes up and everything that how I'm going to do everything. It just evolved kind of organically to some degree, and so it was. I'm glad the writing process is not easy, as you know. So especially writing a book, it's a hard it's a. But I'm happy I did this. This is I really felt good about it. That when it was complete, and that some people, the people who have written things about it or have told me about the quotes and everything, have been affected by it positively, and that was the goal.
Awesome. That's
Mhm.
incredible. Yeah, I'm sort of like you. I sort of wing it. I
Yeah,
think about
yeah,
it.
right.
And then there's those times where it's just like, not that you're stuck, but you're stuck,
Yeah,
right? Like,
yeah.
like I got to get this done, and then I have all these other excuses, especially, and I work with your publisher as well, so it's like, okay,
Yes, right.
I've got deadlines coming up, and I'm not where I
And
want to be, and,
and
you know,
she is so cool too. She's so
yeah,
cool, you know?
and yep, and I'm sitting here like, oh, yeah, I get it.
Yeah.
Um, because in fact, with mine, I started with an outline, and of course, I started it 6 years ago with that
Oh,
outline, and I can't find the outline now. But which means I guess that wasn't the outline. I don't know, right? Oh, cool. So one of the things that struck me, you said your dad read it,
mhm,
right?
mhm.
Is your dad typically a reader?
Oh, yeah, he was
Okay.
he was an editor for many years, and
Oh,
he was a writer, so he said, "I didn't know some of this stuff." It was funny for him to read it, and he had to try to read it without the editor's look. He had to re "This is your daughter," and he said, "You were," and he loved the way it was written, but he was like, "I could you were so vulnerable about it. Aren't is that hard on you?" And I said, "Not really," 'cause I had to get over that, right? Took a while. I used to be a little more closed about that kind of thing, but he was very he reads a lot, mostly technical though stuff. So this was like, oh my gosh, this is like heart out there, whatever. And he, like he said, I didn't even know you felt that way about stuff all these years. It was kind of interesting to get that perspective from a person who raised you. But
right. Well, and that's why I asked, because that
yeah.
was, I have a lot of family, and I think my dad was the one. I mean, I don't know. Others may have read it and not given me feedback, but for me, it was my stepdad that also had read mine, and
Mhm.
that was his like, man, I had no idea. I didn't
Yeah,
know
they
what
didn't.
you were going through. I didn't
Mhm.
understand that that's how.
Mhm.
So I was just curious, because that was the one thing. I mean, I've never seen him read a book in his life, so
Mhm.
it really was
Wow.
something to me to that he did.
Yeah.
And so I
Yeah.
was I was just curious about that. Yeah, it's and I think, whether it's fiction or whether it's I think you're right. I think when you're writing, you're vulnerable. It all comes out no matter what.
Mhm. Mhm.
And I love it.
Mhm. Mhm.
So how do you go from being a technical writer to now I'm going to, write this inspirational series, or this inspirational book, and is it going to become I mean, will there be more? Where
Oh, I think I did creative writing before. I many years, did it many years ago. I had a few things published, like pop poems and everything. And then when I went into when I went into um, uh, I went back to school for journalism school, and then I got into the whole track of I was a journalist, and I became a corporate writer, then a tech writer. So I kind of lost that along the way. So when pretty much semi-retired, I got back into that, and I thought, I've been in the corporate world for over 40 something years. And I say this in the book too. I say there's a cult life mentality in a corporation, and whatever you say or you think or feel is usually not listened to, and basically you have to become kind of the corporate mind. And I had to kind of deprogram myself for a few months and realize that's not necessarily true. It's just true within the context of where you are, right? You have to get along in that little area. And I transitioned into, okay, I'm going to get back into my creative mind and transit and then to write something inspirational based on uh how I've lived my life and what so that's kind of how it happened. I did contribute to two other books this year, and it was the Art of Connection. We were a part of, you and I were part of, and another one with a group called Amazing Woman. And I did contribute to two other books, And I wrote one book and then contributed to two others. So what I'd like to write next is a kid's book, because I love kids. We have a couple new babies in our family, but that's about and I'm formulating that right now. That's the next one. Something fun, but maybe inspirational for kids, but kind of fun. That's my next one.
Make it fun and teach them lessons,
That's
right?
exactly it.
Right.
And
I now,
yeah.
my kiddo has a series that teaches things like entrepreneurship and things like that, but
Great.
it's super fun.
Yeah.
I love reading it with him, and he loves it because it really strikes. I mean, he's 6, but it really strikes. The stories are just so creative.
Yeah.
So
And they say it's harder to write a children's book sometimes because you have to talk like a kid,
right.
and it's been a long time since I've been a kid, so I'm trying to remember that.
Yep. Oh, I get it, and I certainly have. I've got a little one here that keeps me young and keeps me on my toes that way. All right, so we're going to take a quick break so that we can hear from our sponsor. And when we come back, I would love for you to share a couple of those lessons of what, from Carol's perspective is part of the necessary, and what things should just go to hell or let the rest, and we can chat a little bit about that when we come back. But first, we're going to hear from our sponsor.
Perfect.
Hey, my good people out there, how would you like to be inspiring and motivating? Perhaps be the next Marcus Hart, Brenda Killhofer of Cheap Mama Life Podcast, or maybe even Joe Rogan, the great Joe Rogan. Learn how to transform lives without doing the unthinkable. Taking all of these crazy courses in college. Pay $0 with this free podcast host training course from the Transform You Media Network. Simply sign up and pay nothing. Go to transformubroadcast.com. That's /free-podcast-training. Transform the letter U broadcast.com /free-podcast-training. I'll see you on the other side, and hopefully we'll be listening to your podcast next. Let's do it.
Hello and welcome back to the show. I'm Brenda Killhofer, your cheap mama, and I'm here with author Carol Koppelman, author of Do the Necessary and Let the Rest Go to Hell. So when we left for the break, I had mentioned, and oh my gosh, audience, I wish you guys could listen to the break time and the before time, because I get to learn so much about all of the guests here on the show. And, I learned even more about Carol. You guys are going to want to read the book because she just has so much experience and different things that she's gone through in life that I think will support anyone. So so let's talk a little bit about what are some of those, when you pin them down, some of the most important do the necessary that you share with us in the book. Or don't, or those that you've learned. Okay. Just think.
I'm having to think. Doing the necessary things that I've found and that have worked in my life, and I continue to have to learn as well, because sometimes I repeat things, and like we all do, is focus on the present, which is not a new concept, but focus on the day. Focus on what you can give to the world, whatever it is, with your husband, with your kids, with your neighbors. Focus on the good you can give. And I've had to work on this a lot in my life. Remember to breathe. I take a breathwork course from a guy in California virtually. And remember to keep track of your breath. It helps your physical health. It helps your mental health, certainly. The the things to let the rest go to hell are expectations of others, and that's hard to do. My upbringing, I grew up in that bridge between the women's lib movement and the domestic goddess movement, and I think a lot of us were like, we're trying to please everybody, being both of these or one of these or whatever the society says we should be. I see a similar trend now on social media, certainly, but for a different cause. I have to be the most beautiful girl. I have to be the smartest guy. I have to be whatever it is. Nobody really cares. You know, we feel like everybody cares. At least that's how I look at it. We feel that everybody cares that we're we have to be all these things. They don't really care because they're too involved with their own lives most of the time. And we want to, at least I know my generation did as a woman, wanted to please everybody. And I hit a point, I think, in my early 60s that basically I'm going to please myself first, please God first, myself second, and other people third. And I don't care what anybody thinks about me. And I feel like because you create a lot of stress in your life. And that's letting the rest go to hell. My husband is, one of the things that was very attractive to me about him, when we were dating, he was so comfortable in his own skin. And I would tell him, and he says, well, I don't even think about any of that. And I said, that's what's so cool about it, is that you are so comfortable in whoever you are, that's a quiet confidence. And I think that that's something that comes from not worrying about whatever everybody thinks about you, trying to show off that you're this wonderful person all the time or whatever, when everybody doesn't care, or only a few people care, and they're trying to do the same thing. Let that go to hell.
Right.
That's my advice.
I love it. So I want to, what's so, I want to unpack a little bit, because in some ways, what you're saying is almost contradictory to somebody who hasn't experienced it yet, right? Like, I totally understand where you're coming from. So when you talked about the necessary, you talked about contribution to others and serving others and doing for others. And then on the flip side, let the expectations of others go to hell. And I get where you're coming from, but I don't know that everybody, I mean, I think that's one of those things that, unfortunately, at least for me, it took some gray hairs to start to understand and get. And I'd love to unpack this in a way that, our younger listeners can understand that there's a difference between people pleasing and meeting the expectations of others, because at the end of the day, they're more concerned with, most people are more concerned with placing themselves somewhere on a hierarchy higher than you, right? So even if you are meeting those expectations, we're always going to get criticism, and we're always going to feel that we're not meeting an expectation. At least that's been my experience. Even if they don't mean to criticize, right? Sometimes it's just their personality style. You never know where someone else is coming from in that. So how do you make that shift towards being of contribution, serving, and yet not losing yourself in being a people pleaser to contribute and serve for others? Any advice there?
I believe, and I appreciate that question. Having a servant's heart. So I feel, at least my focus every day is to help other people and have a servant's heart to help them. That doesn't mean to be a pushover by any means, or somebody. It means to just give to them, give your love, give your good words. If you can contribute, if you can donate, that kind of thing, or you can donate time, you can donate money or whatever, to do something like that with no expectation. no expectation. The converse and let the rest go to hell with people is a lot of the social media stuff where we're trying to keep up with the Joneses kind of thing, and trying to um, like, virtue signal, which I you know um, that we're these wonderful people and our life is perfect, and we're doing all it's no, try not, and or if people are criticizing you because they're either mad at you for whatever it is, or are they are miserable people, so they're criticizing you or whatever. Let that go to hell. You can do both. If going in there with a servant's heart for people to give to them, not being letting people take advantage of you in a negative way. Certainly you don't want to do that, but you can give and have a servant's heart and love people, but you don't have to on social media, especially, or if other people have expectations outside of social media. Those are their expectations, not your expectations, and you don't let yourself get so stressed out by those that controls your life, if that makes sense. Does that make
Yeah, I
Yeah.
I I
Mhm,
look back to some of my younger years where
mhm.
the giving was in an effort. I don't know that I was fully aware of it at the time, but the giving
Mhm,
was in an effort to look good, for
mhm, mhm.
someone to
Yeah,
notice, for everybody to
yeah,
see me doing this.
that's
And
exactly,
and
yeah.
at the
Mhm,
cost of precious time with people I cared about,
mhm,
and
mhm,
feeling as though I could never do enough. I mean,
mhm.
sure, I love the, oh my gosh, you're super mom, how do you do all of that, and wearing that like this badge of honor, but going home completely drained and not doing any of it well, doing
Mhm,
all of
mhm,
it badly, but showing up, right? Or not, and not necessarily that I did it badly, but that I had
mhm.
such high expectations of my own performance that I still walked away from whatever it was feeling like I'd failed because I didn't do enough. And again, that was this
Mhm.
external expectation that I thought was out there and wasn't necessarily out there. And now I find that, I can invite somebody to be a customer or a team member in my business world and be completely from contribution, right?
That's right, that's right,
Where
exactly.
it can be completely joyful, and getting rid of that attachment to, oh, I get something out of this, therefore it's
Mm,
not contribution. I
that's right.
feel like when we're really in a heart of contribution, we do get
That
something out. We
that's
either
that's yes.
we're our heart is full, we're getting filled and that to me is
Mhm,
really contribution, right?
mhm.
Because it's a
Absolutely.
it's a first thought, I should do this, I follow through, I feel good, the person feels good,
That's right.
and we create this relationship whether
Mhm,
we'd had one or not. And I love what you bring about
mhm, mhm,
on
mhm.
social media. It's so funny because at the end of the day, there are people out there, like yourself. There are people out there who genuinely, truly will serve you.
Mhm, mhm.
Should you say, "Hey, I need help,"
That's
right?
exactly it. And
I
they're selfless about it too. And
right,
they're not looking for anything. And
yeah,
I did the same thing. I did the
yeah.
same thing when I was younger as well.
And
That's
why
why
do us as women
I don't
have to
know.
go through this,
I
right?
don't
Like,
know.
because everybody, we all do,
Yeah, yeah,
and
yeah.
so I
Yeah.
love that there are people like yourself that are going and saying, hey, let's try and learn these things. And maybe somebody tried to tell me, maybe they didn't.
Mhm.
I don't know. But gosh, I sure wish we could figure these things out, in our 20s,
Yeah.
and be able to, before we mess up our kids, before.
I think it's it was a societal thing too. There's so much, and it was really a societal thing, and I get concerned now, because we have social media, everybody can see everything and that kind of stuff, that it just continues. But I'm hoping that transformation is coming more often, what you're just talking about. It's coming from servants' hearts, coming from selflessness, not being a doormat or anything like that.
Right.
Not worrying about what everybody else thinks about all of it or whatever, or anything in your life. It's none of their business really. And not having your ego, especially on clicks, with a lot of these young guys,
Right.
it's like my sense of self is all based on how many likes I get. And that's it's bits and bytes, and that's it. It's algorithms. Sometimes it's bots. Sometimes
Right.
it's not even real sometimes. So, and it does a number on your brain. And I don't want to see that. It really concerns me, because when I was growing up, we didn't have until, at least in the 2000s, where we had all of this stuff, but we still had that push to be liked and accepted and
Right.
all of this kind of stuff. But
the feedback wasn't quite so immediate, or quite, it was like, now it's like, oh my gosh, I did this post a couple hours later. In fact, I think I had heard, I actually heard of a story, and I don't know, of a young person who had posted a video or a song on YouTube that they had created, and were suicidal and depressed less than a couple hours later, because they didn't get the likes that they had, they put it all out there with it, and they hadn't really even given the time for it,
Sure.
because they're looking for that immediate, instantaneous, I need a like. And then of course, then there's haters going to hate. Now, I love, I have a mentor that always says, you know what, the more criticism I get, the more I know that I'm making a difference out in the world.
That's exactly right.
Because if I wasn't getting the criticism, then I'm not reaching enough people, because it's unrealistic to think that the whole world is going to like us.
That's right. That's right. They're not.
They're not. We are going to trigger some people, no matter what.
That's right. I remember I was, when I worked on the newspaper, there was a guy who didn't like something I wrote, and it was completely accurate. And he was a whistleblower, and I sat with him and did everything, and we accurately did everything, and double checked and triple checked and whatever. And I talked to my editor, and I said, he's being horrible. She says, hey, at least she says he's reading it, and he's trying to get attention, essentially, by being a jerk about it, because this is exactly what he told us. He says, but also you're getting, if you get negative input, it's just as good sometimes as positive input, because at least somebody's reading it.
Well, and then the other thing I know sometimes, and it was something I got to become very aware of, is that if I see something in somebody else that I don't like, or that triggers me,
that's right.
Most likely it's a quality about myself that they are displaying that it's triggering me. So sometimes I have to, so again, when the feedback comes, it's like, okay, this is about them. It's not about me.
Yeah, considering the source, right?
Right. Because there's something that clearly, if they're triggered, there's something within them that is triggered by something I'm saying or doing. So at the end of the day, it's really about them. It's not about me. And, and it's fresh. Yeah, it is. I mean, I have a teenage daughter, so I can absolutely, relate to, and the frustration around the social media, because I don't, even these, the obsession with selfies and those kinds of things. And, because nobody can see the absolutely beautiful, amazing person I see, the heart behind her, all of those things on social media. One, we just typically don't let that much show. And if you don't let it all show, how's anybody to know?
That's exactly,
really.
Yeah, that's perfect. That's perfect. No, that's exactly it. And I like what you're saying, because what I'm seeing, I am in some forms of social media, other than a lot of the negative stuff, is that people are kind of gearing towards that authenticity now. They're trying to, or at least in some places, they're say we have to be more authentic with each other, and that's okay. Even if somebody sees us for who we really are, the right people are going to connect with us.
Right.
And they may be somebody we've never met before, but the good people are going to connect. The right people for our lives will connect with us if we're authentic and we're not trying to put this face on and so
Right.
that, absolutely.
Yeah, it's such a necessary evil in some, because so many
Yeah.
of us use it in business for marketing. We're using it to, or even I mean, like there's LinkedIn. So even people who aren't entrepreneurs are using it to get jobs and things like that. And then of course, if, the flip side is if something, to the negative goes out, they're looking at these things now. They're, so, there's that, how am I authentic without being offensive, right? Because because we are, I mean, I think that for me, I love that that with that you took that pandemic opportunity to go out and inspire others, and you brought up the fear. But I know for me, that was the biggest thing during the pandemic was, all right, I'm a pretty opinionated person, not to say I don't listen to and absorb and kind of, and try to understand others' point of view.
Sure.
And I'm okay having a different point of view than others. And yet there was a lot of fear for me anyway, around really showing up and sharing my point of view for fear that someone would misunderstand my heart, right? Sure. And be offended. And, and I think that still, beyond pandemic continues, again, because to your point, that's what the media is selling. I mean, the media has created an all out, war between ideals, right? Period. Right. If you're either on this ideal or you're this ideal, and if you're not, you're all of these things. And I think, unfortunately, so many of us as Americans have bought into that. And then social media expands that. And I think, to your point, where people go back to trying to meet the expectations of others or be accepted by others, and show up less than who they are.
To your point too, is that we are, because of the media doing this and they make money off of it, but we are, like you said, we are more alike than we are different. I have many people of all kinds of ideologies. I have my own ideologies. And when it comes down to it, a lot of the, especially on extreme different, extreme idea, they're more alike actually. And it's interesting when they talk, they have so much more in common outside of that, maybe that ideology, and actually within the context of that ideology, they really do. They just don't think they do. And they've, gotten into separating themselves, maybe by being influenced with the media or whatever, or just gotten into their own head, that way. But it's not true. That's not true. The truth is they're more alike than they are.
And I think that's the bottom line, is at our core, we all have the same basic wants, needs. We want to belong. We want love. We want,
that's exactly it.
And that's why a book like yours is so inspiring and can reach all, can reach regardless. Because at our core, we all want this. Now, depending on ideology, we may have different ideals as far as how to get to that place. Where, I think going right back to what you said in the beginning, about whether it was your Catholic faith, relationship faith, whatever, spirituality, all of those things, it all boils back down to one thing, and that's just love one another.
That's exactly it. Absolutely. Absolutely. That's what we're called to do, right?
Absolutely. Love and serve. And I love that.
Yeah.
So I hope that this gives some insight, and definitely want to learn more on the breath piece of it. And we're out of time. So tell the listeners, how do they get their hands on doing the necessary and letting the rest go to hell?
You can find my book on Amazon at Do the Necessary, Let the Rest Go to Hell by Carol Patricia Koppelman.
Awesome. All right. Thank you, listeners, for being here today. Carol, thank you so much. I hope you'll come back. It was so much fun today. Don't forget to download, like, and share the Cheap Mama Life, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you so much.
Hope you enjoyed that episode of the Cheap Mama Life podcast. Be sure to subscribe, rate, and review right now if you haven't already, and hit that share button. Until next time.